or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
Did we hear that? If you've ever wondered what it's like to not have the First Amendment or free speech, the UK and what they're doing right now to their citizens is a pretty dang good example of the draconian measures that the government will take to silence opposition. This is a clip of some police officer type in the UK describing what they'll do if you violate their speech laws, which again is a crazy thing to think about if you come from the United States and you're allowed to say everything short of a threat. This is happening in real time in the UK. People are being arrested for Facebook comments that the government deems as mean, effectively, but it doesn't stop there. I want you to listen to what this guy says, and then we can talk about the even more horrifying components that are going on in our friends from across the Atlantic.
We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
Did we hear that? Unless he made it very clear. If you're in this country committing crimes on the streets, or if you're committing crimes from afar online, are we going to extradite people who have broken British speech laws? What does that mean? I think he gets questioned about it.
About that, because we have seen some high-profile figures whipping up the hatred. You talked about it in there with the officers, in fact, about this being added to by online commentary. I mean, I'm even thinking of the likes of Elon Musk getting involved. What are you considering when it comes to dealing with people who are whipping up this kind of behaviour from behind a keyboard, maybe in a different country?
Being a keyboard warrior does not make you safe from the law. You can be guilty of offences of incitement, of stirring up racial hatred. There are numerous terrorist offences regarding the sort of publishing of material. All of those offences are in play if people are provoking hatred and violence on the streets, and we will come after those individuals just as we will physically confront on the streets the thugs and the yobs who are causing the problems for communities.
Holy crap. Seriously, this is what happens when you don't have free speech in a country. You have guys like this saying, well, if you're a keyboard warrior, we will find you and we will punish you accordingly. Now, I've made this point a couple times. I think the last time I made it, it wasn't as well fleshed out, probably. But the idea that the First Amendment exists in this country cannot be taken for granted, and also is protected by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment defends the First. That's a pretty age-old saying. But I think one of the reasons for that is because there are a bunch of videos going around on social media of people getting arrested in their homes for Facebook comments. Now, what I'm about to say has nothing, I am not in any way, shape, or forming advocating for violence against authorities. However, when you have a law, the law needs to be reasonable enough for the people who enforce that law to want to enforce it. In other words, if somebody commits a heinous crime that everybody agrees is a heinous crime, like they've committed a murder or at least are suspected of committing a murder, the police are willing to risk their own safety in order to apprehend that person, because the crime fits the risk that they take to their own personal safety, and in the hope that we can keep the public and the society safe. Now, there are limits to what legislation can do that law enforcement officials will enforce. In other words, if the law gets too crazy, there is a limit to where a police officer says, no, I'm not going to barge into that person's home in order to arrest them for that. Let's just say, hypothetically, the United States made it illegal to put pineapple on pizza, which I think they should do. But let's just say that happens, and the legislative body, the people who make the laws, say, okay, law enforcement, you have to go into that person's home and arrest them for pineapple on pizza, which I think would be totally justified, but that's beside the point. My guess is that in the United States, where the Second Amendment exists, the overwhelming majority of police officers would look at that law, look at the risk to their own personal safety, and go, I'm not doing that. The law can only exist to the extent that people are willing to enforce it. And if there is too much of a risk to the officer's safety, they won't enforce that law, which allows for the system to self-correct in laws that are too ridiculous. In other words, legislators won't pass laws that can't feasibly be enforced, and a lot of the limitations there have to do with the Second Amendment. In the UK, on the other hand, where they don't have the First Amendment and they don't have the Second Amendment, there is no risk, not no risk, but there's a minimal risk to the personal safety of police officers. So when the police officers in the UK are tasked with apprehending people and taking them to jail for commenting something that the government deems as mean on Facebook, they go, well, I don't want to lose my job, so I might as well do it. Because there's really no inherent risk to them doing so. Again, I am not advocating for people who are being arrested in their homes to fight back. I don't think you should do that. I think you should fight through the legal system. That's why, I love the laws of the United States and the appeals process, all of that sort of stuff. What I am saying, though, is that if there is personal safety risk to the police officer that is having to enforce any laws, the limitations of those laws are beholden to what that officer is willing to do. And if U.S. citizens, through the Second Amendment, are able to maintain some modicum of defense against the government and the unconstitutional intrusion into their life, then the laws can't get to where they are in the UK right now. I think Elon Musk is playing a role in this on Twitter, but it'll be really interesting to see if any country, in order to curry favor with the British government, extradites somebody back to the UK for an inappropriate tweet. I don't even want to say inappropriate, just a tweet that they don't like. And considering we'll call it an invasion that's happening in the UK, there's a lot of stuff being said online that the British government is going to be really cracking down on. And I think at the end of the day, what I think we should all be thankful for is the fact that we don't have to deal with that here. Hopefully that's not coming down the pike in the U.S. where they roll back the rights of the First Amendment. I don't think they necessarily can, but a lot of Democrat politicians want to. But yeah, thank God we don't have to deal with the craziness that the UK and the British citizens have to deal with.